Well, hope everybody had a good day today. So good to have everybody back this evening. Be back with y'all. It's been a little while. I've got out of practice in the book of Daniel, so I probably forgot everything I said up to this point. So no telling what I'll repeat. But we got through chapter 9 through verse 19 last time. Is it not working? Testing. Maybe I'm just not talking. I'm not talking as loud as I usually do. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is my teaching voice instead of my evangelism voice. Okay. So we're going to be picking up where we left off last time. Daniel chapter 9 verse 20. One of the tougher sections of the Bible. I said last time this first part of chapter 9 that leads into this was a really good study, and here's the thing. I'm not even sure how much these verses happen if the first part of the chapter doesn't happen, right? If Daniel is not on his knees praying, if he's not humbling himself, if he's not crying out to God in humility and admitting that he has sinned and his people have sinned and that God is God and that his judgments are just and that they've been in captivity here because of what they did, not just because God arbitrarily decided to send the Babylonians to them. It wasn't that God just kind of sitting up there watching and say, you know what, I think I'll let the Babylonians come take them for a while. No, all of this happened because of what they did. And Daniel is admitting that. He's praying. He's looking in the Bible. He's looking at Jeremiah. He's reading the Old Testament. He's reading the prophets. He has found that 70 years is what God said that the judgment would be, and that they would be in captivity for 70 years. He knows that's getting close. And so he is praying that God would not prolong it, that he is admitting their sin, and God has been giving Daniel some visions. Well, I think God wants Daniel to know, and he wants the children of Israel to know, and he wants us to know that he is a God who keeps his promises. He's a God who loves his children. He's a God who's going to win in the end. If you're on his side and you're going with him, he's going to win. I mean, this whole thing, everything that from the beginning of humanity to the end of humanity, God knows it. He is a part of it. And at the end of it, he wins. And he wants us to know that. He wanted the children of Israel to know that they were not going to be in captivity forever, that he was going to bring them out of captivity. But he wants Daniel to know something else, that it's not just right now. It's not just about me taking you out of captivity right now, putting you back in Israel, putting you back in Jerusalem, rebuilding the temple. It's not even just about that. There is a bigger picture than that. And so verse 19 ended with, O Lord, hear, O Lord, forgive, O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake, O my God, for thy city and thy people are called by thy name. And notice that this is about God. It's not about Daniel. It's not about Israel even. It's not about Jerusalem. It's not about the walls. It's not even about the temple. It's about God. For his sake. We're called by your name for your sake. We Christians are called by his name for his sake. Not just our sake, for his sake. It's a wonderful honor to be able to be called Christians and be called by his name, but it's for his sake, his glory, that we're here. And so Daniel realized that. We need to keep that in mind, that everything isn't just about us. You know, I think about when we are praying for our nation. Remember, we pray for our nation to come back to God, and we want the morality to increase in our nation. We want people we want Christianity to thrive. We want We want our kids to grow up in a nation that loves God. A lot of that is because of us, though, isn't it? We got to remember we're a Christian nation first and foremost because of God. God allows us to be blessed first and foremost because of God. When we stop glorifying Him, then we're not really a Christian nation anymore. So we got to remember that. Daniel had got a hope to that. I think Israel forgets that. I think sometimes we in the United States forget that ultimately it's about glorifying God and not just about making things better for me or my kids or being more comfortable in our society. We want God to be glorified. And he says in verse 20, and whiles I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God. Daniel truly had a desire to see God's people in the land that God gave them, worshiping in the temple God commanded them to worship in, and glorifying God Himself. And he was praying for that. That's what he's praying for. He was confessing their sin and the sin of his people. First of all his own, then his people, and then also asking God to restore, for His own sake, the people in Israel, that He might be glorified. You know, when God's people, when a Christian nation turns away from God, that is a very sad thing. It's a sad thing. It's sad wherever it is, whenever it is, and mostly because there are people in the world who look at that and they do not glorify God through it. They laugh. They say, yeah, God, I knew God wasn't real. I knew God didn't mean anything to you. Every time when a Christian messes up, look around. There'll be somebody wanting to tell about it. Watch the news. Anybody, if you've ever called yourself a Christian or taught Sunday school and you mess up, what are they going to report? Sunday school teacher messed up. Preacher messed up. You're not just a person. You're called by His name. You got to live up to it. The world's going to make you, right? The world's going to say so. So he says in verse 21, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. I love the way things, I picture it in my mind. Daniel is enthralled in prayer. He is tuned into his prayer to God. The angel comes into the room and has to come up and touch him. Taps him on the shoulder. Hey, Daniel, God sent me to tell you something. You know, isn't that something? He says, well, I was, and he was still praying, still in the middle of the prayer, and God sent an answer. It's hard for us to understand that, in a way, because we can't get to everything, right? I mean, I have a list of emails when I go back to work this long, and it takes me 20 minutes to look at all of them, another 20 minutes to answer them. I have to get on the phone and call back people after people after people, or what, I can't do it all at one time, right? I can't pay attention to everything. The last email might be important. The last message on the phone might be important, but I got to go through all of them to get there. God is paying attention to us as we're praying, real time. And before he got through praying, God had sent Gabriel to talk to him about it. Again, I think because God wants us to know who he is. He wants us to know that he wanted Daniel and the people to know that it was a greater thing, even in going back to Jerusalem. He was sending a Messiah. And I think he wanted them to know when he was sending the Messiah so they could be looking and watching. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. I'm not sure exactly what to make of that, because I think it's interesting that he says he's going to give him skill and understanding. If he explains it to him, God is the one with the skill and understanding, and he's got to explain it to us. But this is something that's going to help him through the rest of his life, isn't it? This experience, I think, is going to change Daniel for the better and give him a better understanding of life, a better understanding of God, give him skill in being able to talk to others and live his life in a godly fashion. Nothing that God does in our lives is for no reason. He has a reason for it, and he wants to build our skill and understanding every day. So as things happen and he gives us understanding, or he sends somebody in our lives to talk to us or to reveal something to us, we need to take that and go forward, thinking of it as a skill. What do you do with skills? You use skills, right? You use skills in your life. Give him skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. Remember, Daniel was having a hard time understanding these visions. He was looking forward to it a lot like what we're looking forward to the end days, and there's so much speculation. There's that as we get a little bit further in here, I'm not going to talk about that, because I've went back and forth in my mind just where I want to go with the 70 weeks. But just so y'all know, there are lots and lots of different ideas about what these verses mean, and where how it's going to go in the future. Now, don't get me wrong, there is absolutely zero chance that this stuff doesn't happen. I mean, this is going to happen. God has decided all of this is true and real and will happen. But just exactly how it's all going to look, I don't think anybody has any idea. And Daniel didn't know either, even though Gabriel's coming again to talk to him about some of this stuff. He says he is greatly beloved. I tell you, isn't it a wonderful testimony to say I'm greatly beloved of God? And he loves us all. But boy, Daniel was greatly beloved, to the point that God sent his angel to talk to him and to comfort him and give him understanding. So he says, consider the vision. Understand the matter and consider the vision. Again, consider it, understand it, think about it. These are not words for Daniel anyway. This are words like, look at this. This is teach this. Teach your children about this. Look at the years and the days as they go by, and have an understanding. It's amazing how God works. At least for me, as we began this in Daniel, I've hit studies on Revelations. I've talked about Christmas, where so much some of them were definitely, I think, looking for this event. How were they looking for this event? I believe because of this, because God told them when it was going to be. And there were some, certainly not all, but there were some who took this and said, I believe what God said. And when this comes about, this is going to come about. We need to be looking for it. Just like Daniel got close to the 70 years, and he said, we're close. I'm looking for it. I think there were people in Jesus' time who were saying, it's close. I'm looking for it. I know that what God said is true. Okay, so some of this, of course, has happened. Some still to happen. But we can, we can clap our hands and say, it's close. I'm looking for it, right? We can do that even today. And so verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. So these 70 weeks are for Daniel's people, the Israelite nation. That is so some of the misunderstanding about this is about these last couple thousand years and how it doesn't fit. Well, this is about the Israelite people, and so that's what it's about. Now, the Bible itself, you say, well, how do we get it? How do we get it split up so that there's 7 years at the end? Well, the Bible splits it up. That's how we do that. It's interesting, some of the things I read, and they ask those kind of questions. Well, why do you arbitrarily split it up into 7 and that last 1 week at the end, those 7 years? It's not arbitrary. The Bible splits it up. So these 70 weeks, and literally 77s in Hebrew, mostly determined. We go back and read some other places. It's pretty well understood that these 70 weeks are 70 weeks of years, 77s of years. And they're determined upon thy people and the holy city Jerusalem to finish a transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So one of the things that some people will say is that all of Daniel's prophecy has already happened. There's no prophecy left going forward. It's all happened already. Well, there's a lot of good reasons why that's not true. One of the good reasons is because a lot of this hasn't happened, has it? Look around you. Is there still sin? Jesus hadn't made an end to sin yet. He hadn't finished the transgressions. He's not made an end of sins. Now, reconciliation for iniquity has happened. Jesus dying on the cross. Now, I guess you could technically say that when he died on the cross, that he did the work that made everything else possible, the remission of sins. But he has not made an end to sin yet. We know that's going to happen. The transgressions hasn't been finished. Israel, they still have not accepted Jesus as their Savior. He's going to bring in, has he brought in everlasting righteousness yet? That's the kind of language where you're looking at the millennial kingdom. That's Jesus coming back and setting up his kingdom and bringing in everlasting righteousness. And to seal up the vision and prophecy. He's going to, everything that he has told, everything that's in this Bible that is a prophecy that God has told us, all those things are going to happen. They're going to be fulfilled. The visions and prophecies are all going to be sealed up. They're going to be finished when Jesus comes back and sets up his kingdom, and all the prophecies then are fulfilled then, going into the very last days when there's a new heaven and a new earth. But none of that's happened yet. And to anoint the most holy. Now that is, from everything I read, that word for the most holy, my first thought is that was Jesus, but the Hebrew word used there for the most holy is the word for the temple. And so I think what we're talking about here is anointing of the temple. Now, there could be an argument made. Jesus said that his body is the temple, that he was the new temple. So there could be that argument made. But we talked about it a little bit in talking about Ezekiel, about a new temple being built. Very interesting study. Very possibly that. And so now therefore, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? If these are weeks of years, which is the only thing you could really kind of get messed up with, I think. We talked about it a little bit. I don't know that I want to start adding days and trying to pinpoint exact days on the calendar. I honestly, I've thought about all that, and I said, you know what? I don't think that is really necessary. All of us have kind of seen that stuff. We've looked at it. There are as many studies as there are people nearly about how to pinpoint the days, and each one is pinpointing days to a different day. Y'all, God said it is true. And in my mind, just the fact that we're in the ballpark to these days means it's true. We just got to trust that God said it and that's the way it is, and be looking, like he said, looking for that day. They were looking for that day in those days. They were close enough. They should have been able to been looking for Jesus the Messiah. So what it says is, from the command to go forth and restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah. So there's some discrepancy. Some different people think different ones, because there's 3 or 4 different commands to go back and rebuild the temple, rebuild the city, rebuild the walls. There was one that basically allowed allowed Israel to become its own nation again. The different ones think that different ones of those commands are the one that you start with. Again, I don't think I want to go there. But from that day, from that command, and there's only a few years in between them, from the command to go back and rebuild and restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah was 7 weeks. Now those 7 weeks, that 49 years, 7 weeks of years, so 49 years is about the same amount of time that Nehemiah's ministry was going on, rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple. So about those 49 years, I think that's probably what we're talking about here. Those 7 weeks are those first 49 years. And then 62 weeks, 62 more weeks added on to that brings us to 69 weeks. So after the 62 weeks, it says that Messiah shall be cut off. So, but before we get to there, that's pretty accurate. I mean, no matter which one of the commands that you want to start with, you're still within pretty tight space there where Messiah is going to come. You're close enough, you ought to be looking, right? And I believe a lot of people were. Now the Pharisees were not, but there were those who were looking. And they knew Jesus when they saw him because they were looking for him. It says the street shall be built again and the wall, even in troublous times. So if you go back and read Ezra and Nehemiah, you find exactly that this is not going to be an easy thing. Again, I hear people, I've heard people over the years tell me that, well, and they mean well. They look me straight in the eye and say, Brandon, it wouldn't be this hard if God meant it to be. If this was God's will, you wouldn't be having this hard a time with this. And when I was younger, that kind of thing got under my skin. Well, y'all, I've got to the point now, I know that's not true. Just because God tells me to go do something don't mean it's going to be easy. We can't expect it to be easy. And very often the things that he wants us to do are the harder things to do. Right? And he wants it to be hard. He wants it to be beyond my ability. So he gets the glory when it gets done because he's the only one who could have done it. But while everything was being rebuilt, they had no end of trouble. They had enemies coming in and burning things and fighting against them. And they had new rulers say, no, you can't do it anymore, and made them stop for a while and then let them start back. This was not an easy thing. And it was troublous times. He even goes so far as to say, we're going to send you back, and there's going to be a command to rebuild, but it's not going to be easy. Again, if you were in that time and you were in that group going back to Jerusalem to rebuild, you don't like it to be hard, but doesn't it help you to know this is going to be hard, and God said it was going to be hard. But he's going to help us, and he's going to get us through it. Y'all, again, things are hard. Life is hard. But he'll never leave us or forsake us. He's going to get us through it. And that's a promise from God's Word. Believe the promise. When you read it, believe it. It would help them to know when they got there and they had trouble, not to just throw their hands up and say, this must not be what God wanted. Don't do that. So it says then, after 62 weeks, the 62 weeks. Now the 62 weeks came after the 7 weeks. So this is 69 weeks from the command to restore and build Jerusalem. It says Messiah shall be cut off. Now I personally, I think that this comes exactly to the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the donkey. That's my personal feeling. There are some people, and so you'll see some folks who think there are only 3.5 years left at the end. A lot of those folks think that 3.5 years before, they cut it, bring it back 3.5 years, and they think it came, that this prophecy ends at the time when Jesus was baptized. And then 3.5 years later, he was crucified, and that leaves only 3.5 years at the end. I think probably that is would be my second go-to, but I believe that it went to the day he entered Jerusalem and Israel rejected him. They brought him in, and then they rejected him within 3 days and crucified him. I think it, for me, that's where I stand on when this, if you added the days exactly, that's where I think it goes. And I've seen the days added exactly that way. But again, I'm not the one who added them. I'm not the one that did all the research. I'm not the one that did the math. So whatever I'm telling you about how the math adds up exactly, I'm speaking from somebody else anyway. But what I can tell you for sure is that's what God said, that's what happened. And it happened just like he wanted it to happen, when he wanted it to happen. And some of the things that we know is that, for sure, what I know is that all this hasn't happened already. So there are a lot of folks who think there is no more prophecy, that all this has already happened, and there's not going to be a second coming. There's not going to be a millennial reign. That a lot of people don't believe that. But y'all, the Bible, to me, is very clear. As a matter of fact, you go back and listen to Jesus. Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation that Daniel spoke of, when you see that in the future. And so if Jesus said it, that's for sure. There's still some left to happen. So to me, that doesn't make any sense at all. So after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Now we know that Jesus came. He was the Messiah of the Jewish people. He came as the prophecy said, but he was cut off, but not for himself. He was cut off not because he had sinned or because of anything he had done, but he came and died for us. And so that is very significant, that God said this was going to happen all these years ahead. He said, I'm going to send my son, the Messiah. He's going to come, and he is going to die, but not for himself. He's going to die for you guys, for the people, and ultimately for the Gentile people being grafted in, right? Because the Jewish people as a whole rejected him. But he was not cut off for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So, so when the Bible is talking about it, here's another reason why this all has to happen, is the Bible actually predicts the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. This is what he's talking about, the people of the prince that is to come. This is biblical proof that the Antichrist has some connection to Rome, because the Romans, we know, looking back, are the ones who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple in 70 A.D. And we know that what is going to happen, the Antichrist, comes after that. Well, if it comes after 70 A.D., then it still hadn't happened. We just look back through history. And the Bible, to me, clearly says that it's going to happen after 70 A.D., all this about the Antichrist and the end time. And he will come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Over 1 million people were killed in just a very short time in Jerusalem. And the Bible talks about that as one of the punishments of Israel because they rejected Christ. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. After 70 A.D., after that, and then all the way into the end, there's going to be a great war. And up until that war, Armageddon, when Jesus comes back and destroys the Antichrist and the enemies, until then, there are desolations that are going to be determined. Now, you look back over the Jewish people, and they have had many desolations that have been determined upon them all through the years. So some of them are famous and some of them not so famous, but they've had a rough couple of thousand years as a people. That is absolutely for sure. So the Bible does talk about Israel going back, being brought back to their land. That's already happened 77 years ago. It talks about them being nourished in their land. I think it's interesting that it's an eagle that takes them back to their land on the wings of an eagle. And it talks about in Revelations 42 months, time and a half. I mean, these, now I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. So look, the other thing that people get in a tizzy about is the he in verse 27. Is the he there, is that Jesus or is it the Antichrist? Well, to me, as I look at this, I can't see how this could be Jesus. I see on one hand what they say, he makes a covenant for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he causes sacrifice and oblations to cease. The idea is that in the middle of the 3.5 years he dies on the cross, and there's no reason then for sacrifice. But he's not breaking a covenant. Jesus would never make a covenant and then break it. That doesn't make any sense. The he comes right after we're talking about the prince that is to come. In Revelations, when it talks about the the 42 months and the 3.5 years, when it's talking about that, it's always talking about the Antichrist, not talking about Jesus. So you look in Revelations and you start trying to put these times and everything together, you don't get Jesus, you get the Antichrist. And so this he, in my opinion, this he in verse 27 is certainly the Antichrist. And the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end the wars and desolations are determined. All that, we know that, all those things, we know all that has happened. Those things are true. They've already came about. And they came about exactly like he said it was going to. Now verse 27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So again, if you read Revelations, if you read about the Antichrist, this fits with the Antichrist. The end 7 years, those 3.5 years, the 42 months, the times, and half a time, all those things, when you start looking at those numbers and you look at those time periods, they're talked about in reference to the Antichrist and what he's doing. And then, of course, Jesus coming in at the end of it. But I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that this he is the Antichrist. It points back to the prince that is to come, whose people destroyed the temple in 70 A.D. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Again, we've talked about this a little bit. Antiochus did something very much like this. We've already talked about that. The Bible, in my opinion, Daniel makes it pretty clear the difference between these two, that Antiochus does some things that looks like what the Antichrist is going to do, but it's a foreshadowing of what the Antichrist is actually going to do. And this just proves that point, because this is all happening after 70 AD. And so this could not be Antiochus. So this is the Antichrist. He is causing the sacrifice and the oblations to cease. So again, at this point, the sacrifices have not began again in Israel, but there has been plans for years for that to happen. And so that's one of the things I think is probably going to happen, and it may be very short-lived before the Antichrist actually puts an end to it in the middle of the last 7 years. That he's going to break the treaty. Now, as we're looking forward, one of the things to look for in the Antichrist is a person that's speaking great blasphemies. He's going to be rich and powerful and successful. Everybody's going to like him. Everybody's going to think they need him. He's going to bring the world, it seems, into a better place. It's going to seem like he can make your life better. People are going to flock to him. They're going to think he's something. Be careful. Be careful. Always be careful looking at any human being. Remember, his number is the number of a man. This is going to be a man who seems great, who seems to be able to do a lot, who seems to, be this great person that can help your life. Don't ever put that kind of trust in a man. Any man, no matter who he is, no matter what he does. Listen, everybody's going to know when Jesus comes. Okay? If there's any doubt, it's not him. I've heard people say, I'm scared that I'm going to miss him. I'm scared I'm not going to know. I'm scared that I'm going to think he's the Antichrist. I'm scared. No, listen. When Jesus comes back, you're going to know. There will not be any doubt. There won't be, and by the way, people are scared that they're going to take the mark of the beast by accident. No, the mark of the beast is linked with worship. Go back and read Revelation. It's linked with worship. You're going to know that you're worshiping somebody, that it's not Jesus. Listen, if you tell yourself in your mind that this is the Messiah, yeah, you can probably make yourself believe that. No, y'all. You're going to know when Jesus comes back. There's going to be no doubt. If he brings fire down, don't listen to it. If he gets his head chopped off and he sticks it back on, he's still just a man. Listen, no matter what happens, you're going to know when Jesus comes back. Don't worship anybody else. Don't take his number, no matter what it is. I don't care what it is. Some people say it's not the 666. It's not this. It's not the number. It's his number. If you take anything saying, I'm going to worship this person, and it's not Jesus, you're taking the mark of the beast. But you're not going to do it accident. I just throw that in there for free. People are scared. No. Don't worship anybody but Jesus. And you're going to be all right. Spiritually. So he's going to make a covenant with many for a week. He's going to seem like he's a friend of Israel. He's going to do things that makes Israel think, boy, we're going to be all right. He's going to make a covenant. Maybe it looks like the Middle East is down around their ears, like he's been for years, right? He's going to come in there and he's going to make a covenant. But he's going to break it in the middle. Again, those that think this is Jesus don't make a covenant for 7 years and then break it in the middle. I don't see that. Sacrifice, he's going to cause the sacrifices and the oblations to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. Now listen, Jesus did not destroy the temple. He did not destroy Israel. He does not have anything to do with abominations or making desolate. This is not Jesus. This is the Antichrist. Even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. That is determined shall be poured upon the desolate. God's judgments are just. He's telling Daniel what is going to happen. Listen, he made Israel desolate. He brought them back, rebuilt, made them desolate again. He brought them back. They've rebuilt. They're rebuilding. There have been desolations along the way, punishments. All of this is true, isn't it? The parts that haven't come yet are true too. But take heart. Because Jesus wins. He's already won. He's done everything it takes on that cross to win the battle. We don't have to fight. We just have to fight through this life. We just have to work. But we don't have to fight to win the battle against Satan and against death and all those things that I don't even know how to fight except through my prayer and through the power of Jesus. He's won those fights already. Don't be worried. Don't be scared. He wins. Okay, well, I know that I didn't go into all the great details, and I'm sure I missed a lot. So, y'all start. What do y'all think?